Donna. I'm from Aon. As Alicia said, Aon's first employee-led network that focuses on social mobility. I was asked to explain to some interns and new joiners in Aon last year why I got involved, and I was thinking back on those reasons today. It still stands today as I stand here before you now. The first reason was I saw the name of the colleague whose name was attached to it, the colleague who founded our social mobility network. I already knew her. I was a big fan of hers, and I admire her a lot. That's one of the things I love about working at Aon is the people. So to be perfectly honest, that was the draw in the first instance. But the second draw was that for me, social mobility is about justice, which fortunately is our theme today throughout the evening. And my legal background, it is all just synergy. It all comes together. So this evening is an entire conflagration of all the different things that I love in life, and the cheese puffs, which do help yourselves. They are fabulous. But justice, and my colleagues are at the heart of it. I don't have many slides today, but I just wanted to bring this up to start with, because some people and some groups of people aren't sort of familiar with the language around social mobility and what it actually means. We talk about it a lot now, but sometimes I find that we need to take a step back and actually think, okay, what do we mean here when we talk about social mobility? And this is what I think brings it to life. So I've just put down on the slide the words of the Social Mobility Commission about social mobility being the link between a person's occupation or income and that of their parents. If it's a strong link, it means that it's harder to break away. You're less socially mobile. And where there's a weak link, you've got a higher level of social mobility. So this is not talking about the skills people have. It's not talking about what subjects they're interested in, what their dreams are, what their hopes are. The question of justice here is about the fact that the circumstances of someone's birth can determine then what happens in the rest of their life, and how difficult or how easy it is for us to break that link. It's all about justice. So when I think about what our goals are as the Social Mobility Committee at Aon and advocating for social mobility amongst our communities, I'm really focused on breaking those links. And I know we're sort of talking a lot about the language tonight in terms of balancing the scales. I like to think about it when we're having the discussion in a social mobility context about breaking down barriers, removing obstacles. So rather than being in that sense of, we're sort of giving away from some people to give to others, we're just clearing the path. We're making that space for people who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to make their way on, whether that's joining a particular company or getting into an occupation that they want to get into, or it's about progressing once they actually get there. The social mobilities themselves actually talk about it in terms of people being able to change their stars. So if you're into the more sort of poetic language, that's quite a lovely way of describing it. So when it comes to Aon and what we're trying to achieve now through this brand new employee network, the first thing we are focused on more than anything else right now is data. So if we've got any other data wonks in the building right now, you're in a safe space. We're all about the data. Because we need to we've determined that first things first, we need to understand is what our current colleague population looks like from a socioeconomic background perspective. And then what we're going to do is use that data to inform what changes we're going to make, where we need to apply resources, what the size of those resources are in both time, money, whatever it might be, to support colleagues and prospective colleagues through their journey. So what we need to do to remove those barriers, how big a population at Aon does that apply to? And finally, the why, because the why is crucial, right? And we're in the position right now of not having access to that data. But other firms, other researchers have gone through this process, and what they can tell us about social mobility as an issue is really stark. There's a KPMG study First off, and this is a study I quote on an almost daily basis. Yes, we compete with KPMG at Aon in lots of situations, but in this area they're an absolute leader, and I look forward to every time they bring out a new report on social mobility, because the work they do is incredible. They produced a report in 2022 on social mobility. They've been tracking data at KPMG for over 5 years now, and collected information from over 16,000 colleagues that told them that social mobility or socio-economic background of their population was the characteristic that had the strongest effect on progression when they compared it to everything else. And yet we were miles ahead in terms of collecting data on other characteristics generally, and our regulators and our partnership organisations have all been very focused on other areas. And don't get me wrong, it's incredibly important, but we need some catching up to do on the social mobility data front. Another report, City of London Corporation from 2020, identified that employees from a lower socioeconomic background take 25% longer to progress at work. It's just not justice. It's not fair, right? But all other things excluded, 25% longer to get that promotion. And just to go back a second to what I was mentioning about, so, the KPMG report identifying that socioeconomic background has the biggest impact on progression. When you look at all characteristics alongside themselves, the gap on progression is 32% when you're looking at a colleague from a lower socioeconomic background who also identifies as Black. So this is a compounding issue. And then finally, the Sutton Trust in 2017 also heavily involved in research in this area. They identified that if in the UK, if we brought up levels of social mobility to just the average levels of social mobility that apply across Western Europe, so sort of peer countries, we'd add 2% to GDP. And at that time, this was 2016, 2017, that would have been £39 billion. If you think about all the discussions that go on right now about growth, where we're going to get productivity boosts from, there's all there waiting to be untapped. So all in all, if we, the sort of view we're taking on this at Aon is if we understand more about this aspect of the population of our colleagues, we can contribute to this story that all these firms, all this reporting, all this research is doing by contributing our own data. We want to work with some partnership organisations. The Lord Mayor's office is heavily involved in an organisation that we work with called Progress Together that's focused on progression in the city in particular. So we start getting this data, we can start feeding into that process, and then we've got that evidence base off of which to start making some change so we can move forward. And then one final point about what we're focused on at Aon to bring about this change, and it's also on a storytelling theme. We've been working with colleagues to sort of draw out the stories of individuals and their experiences of, rising through Aon, joining Aon, where those colleagues are from a lower socioeconomic background, and it's our learning series called This Is My Journey. We're finding that this is an incredibly powerful tool for facilitating connections amongst our colleagues and identifying role models within the company, because sometimes the strongest change results from the softest power. Sometimes it's just those stories and conversations and being able to see a path through to an endpoint that you couldn't see was there because, it was maybe covered in all those obstacles and weeds, and actually somebody you didn't know has been there before you. And just to sort of drag out the little metaphor a bit further, I think what our target really is to have all those people that are along that path who've already got there. Maybe they've got part the way on there. Maybe they're sat at the top and sitting pretty, is to reach forward and start clearing the path a bit for others so that they can come through. Just make that journey easier. Because like I was saying earlier, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, the skills are there. They're ready and able. We just need to help them remove the obstacles that stand in their way. They're just there by pure accident of birth. And just a couple of messages that I want to finish on, just to get sort of that get a bit deeper for a moment, but I promise you we're nearly there. I think Alicia mentioned earlier the concept of not just diversity, but diversity, inclusion, and equity within the workplace. I think you really find that when you've got people working together to clear the paths through in that way, removing those obstacles, that's when you're really achieving the inclusion part of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It goes hand in hand with a sense of belonging and that we're all doing this together. Because when we go out to colleagues and ask them to contribute their data to this process so that we can understand what we're dealing with here, there's a certain amount of trust that we understand we have to build up amongst our colleagues. And part of that story for us is going to be explaining to colleagues that this process is going to better foster collaboration and ensure that we're hitting those inclusion targets, not just the diversity targets. And that, I think, one of where it gets really personal for me is that I don't want to see or hear about any other baby lawyers working into their first jobs in the city, to be told that people are making jokes behind your back about you just making up the numbers from a diversity perspective. I've been that person in that position, and it's just not fair. So I think if we could all take the hand of somebody else that's going through that process and make sure that they don't feel like they don't belong just because of where they were born or who their parents were, we're going to start making the improvements that I know we all want to see. So that's just a little bit about what we're doing at Aon. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much to the Lord Mayor's Office and to Belonging Pioneers, which I hope we've sort of drawn out some of the themes that I know you're working so hard on, as well as to other partner organisations and everybody that we've been working together on this topic over the past 12 months who are doing incredible work to help support us on this journey. And the final message I would just leave you with is that I know we can do this because it's just